The weight of her backpack felt heavier with every step as Anna hurried down the sidewalk, exhaustion settling into her bones after 3 back-to-back classes and an 8-hour shift at the coffee shop. The biting November air cut through her thin jacket, a sharp reminder that winter was approaching, and she still couldn't afford a proper coat. When the No 42 bus pulled up, Anna let out a quiet sigh of relief. She climbed aboard, flashing her monthly pass at the driver, a grumpy middle-aged man with perpetually furrowed brows, before slumping into a window seat. Resting her forehead against the cool glass, she watched the city lights blur together, her eyelids growing heavy. "Wait!" A male voice rang out just as the doors began to close. The driver scowled but begrudgingly reopened them. A young man in his early 20s jogged aboard, slightly out of breath. He wore a plain gray sweater that somehow looked expensive, his dark brown hair tousled by the wind. There was something about his confident posture that made a few passengers glance up. "There'll be $3.50, the driver announced flatly. The young man patted his pockets, his expression shifting from confusion to growing panic. I think I left my wallet at home." His voice faltered, embarrassment flickering across his features. "No money, no ride," the driver said, already gesturing toward the door. "I've got a schedule to keep." Anna observed the exchange, recognizing the unmistakable look of humiliation. She knew that feeling all too well. Without overthinking it, she stood up, walked forward, and reached into her pocket for the loose change she'd received as tips earlier. "Here," she said, extending $3.25. "I've got it." The young man turned to her, surprise evident in his amber eyes. For a moment he seemed about to refuse, but then he nodded, gratitude softening his face. "Thank you. I'll pay you back." "Don't worry about it," Anna offered a tired smile before returning to her seat. The young man took a seat a few rows ahead, glancing back at her occasionally. But Anna hardly noticed, lost in thoughts of tomorrow's exam and whether her mother had remembered to take her medication. What she didn't know was that she had just helped Tom Whitaker, heir to the Whitaker Grand Hotel empire, with luxury properties spanning 3 continents. The same Tom whose face sometimes appeared in business magazines beside headlines about the future of the hospitality industry. As the bus rumbled through the city streets, 2 worlds briefly intersected, neither realizing that this small moment would change everything. The espresso machine whirred as Anna worked behind the counter, her hands moving with the effortless precision of someone who had spent 2 years perfecting the art of making coffee. Even on the most exhausting days, she could steam milk and pour perfect latte art without a second thought. "Grande caramel latte with almond milk," Anna called, sliding the cup across the counter without looking up. "Thanks," a familiar voice replied. Anna glanced up instinctively and froze. Standing before her, wearing the same confident expression, was the guy from the bus. "It's you?" she blurted out. He shrugged, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Told you I'd pay you back." "You didn't have to come all this way just for $3.50, Anna said, still caught off guard. "Maybe I just wanted good coffee too," Tom replied, a hint of something playful in his voice. "I'm Tom, by the way." "Anna," she responded automatically, but before she could say more, Lisa, her co-worker, nudged her urgently. "We've got 6 people waiting on drinks, Anna." "Right, sorry." She turned back to her work, but she could still feel Tom's gaze on her as he stepped away from the counter. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him take a seat by the window, pulling out a book instead of his phone, an oddly refreshing detail. Throughout her shift, their eyes met occasionally, brief glances quickly averted. When the rush finally died down, Anna grabbed a rag and approached his table. "So," she said, smirking, "do you make a habit of forgetting your wallet?" Tom chuckled, closing his book. "Not usually. Yesterday was unusual." "How so?" Anna teased. Tom hesitated slightly before answering. "Let's just say I'm trying something new." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious?" "Not intentionally," he admitted, his expression turning more serious. "Honestly, I came back for another reason. Yesterday, you were the first person who did something nice for me without expecting anything in return." "It was just bus fare," Anna said, a little thrown by his intensity. "Still," Tom said earnestly, "I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe with coffee, sometime, when you're not working." Anna studied him carefully. There was something about him she couldn't quite figure out, something he wasn't saying, but his eyes seemed genuine. "I don't even know you," she pointed out. "That's the point of coffee, isn't it? To get to know someone," Tom grinned. Before she could answer, her manager's voice called from behind the counter. "Anna, your break's over." She hesitated, then glanced back at Tom. "I'm here most mornings," he said quickly. "Think about it." Anna nodded slightly before returning to work. For the rest of her shift, she found herself glancing at the spot where he had been sitting, but the next time she looked, the seat was empty. And strangely, she found herself feeling disappointed. Mornings at Brew and Bean had become part of Tom's routine. Every day, without fail, he showed up, ordered a black coffee, and settled into his usual seat by the window. At first, Anna told herself it was just a coincidence. But as the days passed and he kept returning, she couldn't deny the truth. She had started to look forward to those fleeting glances and the short conversations they shared when the shop wasn't too busy. "You really like the coffee here that much?" Anna teased one morning as she wiped down the table near him. Tom smirked, stirring his coffee lazily. "Maybe I just like the place for a different reason." Anna rolled her eyes, but the smile tugging at her lips gave her away. After a few weeks, their interactions extended beyond the coffee shop. At first, it was accidental. Bumping into each other at a bookstore, spotting each other at a small diner near Anna's university. But then, the meetings were no longer coincidences. One evening, after Anna's shift ended, Tom was waiting outside. "Want to take a walk?" he asked. She hesitated for just a second before nodding. They strolled through the city streets, the glow of streetlights casting soft golden hues around them. They talked about everything: music, art, places they dreamed of visiting. Anna shared her love for Renaissance paintings, her dream of working in a museum someday. Tom listened, his eyes fixed on her, taking in every word. But when she turned the questions on him, his family, his past, why he left his job, his answers remained vague. "I used to work in business," he said simply, "but it wasn't the kind of life I wanted." Anna sensed he was holding something back, but she didn't press. What she didn't know was that, despite wanting to open up to her, Tom wasn't ready to let her see the full truth just yet. It was late afternoon, and Brew and Bean was busier than usual. Anna moved quickly behind the counter, calling out orders, barely pausing to catch her breath. The rush was so intense that she hardly noticed when Tom walked in. "Cappuccino, please." She glanced up instinctively, a small smile forming before she even realized it. "You again?" Tom shrugged, dropping a $5 bill into the tip jar. "Told you, I like this place." Before they could say more, the door chimed and a middle-aged man in a tailored suit stepped inside. Anna barely registered his presence, but she noticed the way Tom tensed the moment their eyes met. "Tom?" The man squinted, his tone laced with surprise and amusement. "No way." Tom turned away slightly, as if hoping to go unnoticed. "Too late. Didn't expect to find you in a place like this," the man continued, smirking. "Let me guess, you're experiencing life among the common folk?" Anna frowned, glancing between Tom and the stranger. But before she could ask, another voice cut through the air. Tom Whitaker. A journalist, her press badge swinging from her neck, stood near the counter, phone raised, camera ready. The heir to Whitaker Grand Hotels, slumming it in a local coffee shop. Is this part of some elaborate PR stunt? The room seemed to tilt. Tom Whitaker? As in Whitaker Grand Hotels? The luxury chain with billboards all over the city? Anna turned to Tom, but he said nothing. His silence told her everything. "Anna," Tom started, stepping toward her. She took a step back. "Who are you?" "I was going to tell you," he said quietly, desperation creeping into his voice. "I just needed the right moment." "The right moment?" Anna let out a bitter laugh. "You had weeks, and now I find out from a reporter instead of from you?" The murmurs around the cafe grew louder. Lisa, standing nearby, crossed her arms. "Knew something was off," she muttered. Anna inhaled sharply, trying to keep her emotions in check. She felt exposed, humiliated. Every conversation they'd had, every time he listened to her talk about struggling to pay rent, about her mother's medical bills, Tom had known. He had always known. "You lied to me from the start," she whispered. "No, I never—" "Don't," she cut him off. "I can't do this." She pulled off her apron, feeling suffocated, and turned toward the exit. Tom could only stand there, watching as she disappeared through the door. And in that moment, he knew. He had lost her. Tom stood frozen outside Brew and Bean, watching as Anna disappeared into the bustling city crowd. He wanted to chase after her, to explain, to make her stay. But how could he, when he had already shattered the trust between them? For the first time in his life, words weren't enough. 2 days later, in the massive penthouse apartment his family owned, Tom stood before his father, Richard Whitaker, the man who had dictated his future since the day he was born. "You've caused enough of a mess," Richard said, his tone cool, calculated. "The media is circling like vultures. It's time to stop pretending and step back into the life you were meant for." Tom met his father's gaze, steady and unflinching. "I'm not coming back." Richard scoffed. "And what do you plan to do? Walk away from an empire? All for some barista?" "No," Tom said firmly. "I'm leaving because I refuse to live a life that isn't mine." 3 days later, Tom left the city with nothing but a small backpack and what little savings he had. He didn't know exactly where he was going, only that he needed to figure out who he was without the weight of the Whitaker name. What he didn't know was that, even from a distance, Anna was still watching. 3 weeks had passed since everything fell apart. Anna threw herself into work and school, but no matter how busy she kept herself, she couldn't erase Tom from her thoughts. The question nagged at her. If he was just a liar, why would he walk away from everything? She avoided reading about Whitaker Grand Hotels, but every time she accidentally came across a headline about the missing heir, her heart clenched. One evening, as she set the table for dinner in their tiny apartment, her mother, Margaret, spoke up. "You're still thinking about him." Anna sighed, setting down the plates. "I don't know." "Then why do you still check the news for updates on him?" Anna stayed silent. Her mother studied her for a long moment before saying gently, "If you really want to close this chapter, you need to hear the truth for yourself." Anna tossed and turned, but sleep refused to come. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions. Anger, confusion, something dangerously close to hope. She reached for her laptop, hesitating before typing his name. Did she really want to open this door again? And yet, before she could stop herself, her fingers moved on their own, searching for any trace of where he had gone. She typed Tom Whitaker into the search bar. Not to find articles about his family, but to track down where he had gone. At Pinewood Lodge, a small secluded inn in the mountains, far from the glass towers of the city. And for the first time in weeks, Anna knew exactly what she needed to do. The winding road leading to Pinewood Lodge snaked through misty mountain ridges. As the bus came to a stop at a gravel-lined path, Anna pulled her coat tighter around her. In the distance, the lodge came into view, a rustic wooden building, a stark contrast to the sleek luxury of Whitaker hotels. She took a steadying breath before stepping inside. Behind the front desk, an older man with a graying beard looked up. "Looking for a room?" Anna shook her head. "I'm looking for someone. Tom Whitaker. He works here." The man's brows lifted slightly before he nodded. "He's cleaning rooms. I'll get him." Before Anna could fully brace herself, a door behind the desk swung open. Tom walked out, carrying a stack of towels. Their eyes met. Tom froze, nearly dropping the towels. Anna held her breath, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she expected. An apologetic look, a hesitant smile. But all she saw was pure shock in his amber gaze. "Anna?" His voice was rough, disbelieving. She swallowed. "Hey, Tom." The lodge manager quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the hushed space. "What are you doing here?" Tom finally asked. "I don't know," Anna admitted. "I just needed to hear the truth from you." Tom exhaled, setting the towels down. "I should have told you from the beginning." Anna crossed her arms, studying him. "Then tell me now." Tom took a deep breath. "I didn't want you to see me as a Whitaker. I grew up in a world where people only cared about money and power. When I left, I wanted to figure out who I was without all of that. And then I met you." Anna held his gaze. "And you thought lying was the best way?" "No," Tom said quietly. "I was wrong. But with you, for the first time, I wasn't an heir. I was just a guy on a bus, someone who liked coffee, someone who loved listening to you talk about art." A cold wind drifted in through an open window, but Anna didn't feel the chill. "Have you changed?" she asked. Tom looked straight into her eyes. "I don't know if it's enough, but I know I'm never going back to the life I left behind." The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was just two people, once lost to each other, standing in a quiet mountain lodge, trying to find something worth holding on to again. Mornings in the mountains were far quieter than the city. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the pines, casting a golden glow over the still waters of the lake outside Pinewood Lodge. Anna sat on a wooden bench, cradling a cup of hot coffee between her hands. Beside her, Tom sat in silence, watching the gentle ripples across the surface. "Are you planning to stay here forever?" she asked, breaking the quiet. Tom took a deep breath, as if weighing his answer. "I don't know. It's peaceful here, but it's not everything I want." Anna nodded. She understood. In some ways, Tom had found himself here, but that didn't mean he was meant to stay. Setting her cup down, she turned to him. "So, what are you going to do next?" Tom met her gaze, a slow smile forming. "I think it's time to go back to the real world, but on my own terms." A few months later, Tom returned to the city, not to reclaim Whitaker Grand Hotels, but to build something of his own, a consulting firm that helped small, independent hotels compete against corporate giants. Instead of using his expertise to grow his family's wealth, he used it to help those trying to succeed on their own terms. Anna, too, followed her own path. She graduated and landed her dream job at a renowned art museum. But most importantly, they remained together. They took their time. No secrets, no masks. Just two people who had chosen each other, day by day, step by step. One evening, at the first exhibition Anna curated, Tom arrived just as she was feeling the weight of nervous anticipation. "I figured you could use some encouragement," he said, handing her a small wrapped box. Anna opened it. Inside was an antique silver bookmark engraved with Renaissance patterns. "You always talk about forgotten female artists," Tom explained. "I found this at an old bookshop. It reminded me of you." Anna smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Some love stories weren't about fate. They weren't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. Sometimes love was simply about a choice, choosing each other every single day, despite everything.